Yo, what's good, folks? Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're at in the world. This is Terrence Bain. Welcome to the Definition of Anarchy channel, where today I'm going to get into whether or not there is systemic racism in this country of the United States. The simple answer is yes. The complicated answer is yes. And I'm going to explain. Now, first I want to get into those who say, systemic racism doesn't exist. And they say that the one reason they say this is because they say the media propagates and perpetuates and over exaggerates the level of racism that occurs in this country. Well, just because the media likes to push the narrative, just because they exploit the reality, doesn't mean that their reality does not exist. It doesn't mean that. It just means that they exploit the reality. They use it to their advantage. And in reality, they wouldn't be able to do that if none existed, right? They wouldn't be able to do it. If it was that clear cut that there was no systemic racism in this country, they wouldn't have a leg to stand on. They wouldn't be able to present anything in that regard to that degree. There are many examples of this, right? Many examples throughout the history of this country. This country was actually founded on systemic racism, right? Basically with the slave trade. I know that was like what? It stopped over 150 years ago. That's only 150 years. 500 years of this history in this country. Only 150 of those years where over slavery didn't exist. And, we can get into Jim Crow and everything following that. I mean, a reality, and this is recent history where, overt systemic racism actually occurred in this country. No one can deny that. And if they do, either they're ignorant, delusional, or they're intellectually dishonest. Anyone can tell you that systemic racism ended when slavery ended. They're full of shit. And I would challenge anyone who would push that idea, right? So where is the systemic racism now? Well, it's all over, right? It exists in many systems in this country. It exists in government. It exists in corporations and all that. It's just that's the reality of it. I can get off into some real life examples, right? Let's get into the police departments. I want to stick to that because this is the big thing that's going on right now. Police culture in this country is a big deal, right? Police culture in this country is a big deal. It's the big elephant in the room, right? And let's face it, without law enforcement, you have no law enforcement. You understand what I'm saying? Without law enforcement officers, you have no one to enforce the laws. And this is how the people in this country have been put in check for so long, right? That's why we're in check right now, because so much power is funneled through the police in this country, right? And so what we have is a system of oppression that affects everyone. It affects everyone, no doubt about it. It affects everyone, but there is a huge disparity in who it affects, right? And how much one is affected by it. Now, another fallacy that they'll push is, systemic racism or police racism can't exist because the police brutalize white folks too. That's what they'll say. Well, white folks are being brutalized. White folks are being killed, by the police unjustly. So therefore, it can't be any racism. It's a fallacy, right? It's a fallacy. This is true. While this is true, that doesn't mean that racism doesn't exist. One does not negate the other, right? They're not mutually exclusive realities, right? They're not mutually exclusive realities. The reality is the FBI has acknowledged We like to cherry pick what we believe from the FBI, don't we? Right? We like to cherry pick statistics. We like to cherry pick data. We like to cherry pick studies and all these other things, right? Just like we like to cherry pick when they want to push, when certain individuals want to push the narrative that black folks are more dangerous to black folks than anyone else. Well, they'll go to the FBI statistics for crime, right? Where they say 50% of the crimes committed by black people, and black people are 17% of the population. No problem. No problem believing in that, right? Right? We have no problem trusting the FBI when it comes to that, right? We like to cherry pick what we get from the FBI. Just like we don't want to believe it when the FBI says that there was no Antifa at the Capitol, on January 6th, the insurgency, the so-called insurrection. There was no, left-wing fascist or, left-wing Antifa members, no Black Lives Matter. It was all Trump supporters that did that. The FBI said there was no evidence that there was Antifa or any other left-wing faction at the Capitol. We don't want to believe that, but we'll believe those statistics. We'll believe certain things that come from